Hello, welcome to the next episode of Just Peachy. I'm Peachie Thompson and I'm your host. Just Peachy is a show where we interview leaders and subject matter experts in the fields of insurance, finance, and taxes. We also have a lifestyle section where we talk about everything and anything under the sun. And today I am so excited to introduce to you our next guest speaker. We will talk about some legal stuff, and I have with me the founder of St. Augustine Law Group, Mr. Richard Brooks II. Rich, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Peachy, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I really enjoy doing these sorts of things, giving me an opportunity, a more informal, less intense opportunity to share complicated legal information with the world. So excited to be here.
Yes, so you have a very interesting background. I know you're a musician. You also worked on a car. You're from Mars, right?
Yep,
So
legitimately
Mars,
from
Pennsylvania.
Mars.
So tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, so if we're starting from the beginning, I grew up in western Pennsylvania, small town of Mars. Ironically enough, our school logo was actually blue and gold with rings like Saturn, not red or white, which would be obvious. But so in case anybody from home is listening, there's still time to change it. But
Yeah, right.
Moved to Nashville, Tennessee, following my passion for music. Played guitar at a young age and then later bass, and went to Belmont for a couple of years, eventually transferred after 2.5 years to Flagler, which brought me here to beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, and then never left. Met my now wife, Danielle, at Flagler, and we have 2 beautiful children that I love. And then kind of filling in more of the employment bit, while I was while I was at Flagler, rather, met my would-be business partner. I convinced him, despite having absolutely no engineering background or really knowledge of the subject matter at all, that LED lighting was going to be a big deal. And he, being a serial entrepreneur and a non-traditional student, he was probably in his late 40s at the time. And he was like, let's start a business. So we did. And while I was in law school, we kept that going. And then we ended up partnered with Jasper Engines and Transmissions, basically leveraging their entire logistics fleet as well as their sales team to sell lighting products to their existing customer base, which went well. And as every good story does, it ended somewhat unceremoniously, which is a much longer story for another day. A whole podcast could be filled with the history of that whole ordeal. But after that, I was left with deciding what I was going to do next. I had this law degree, I had a business degree, and I bought StAugustinelawGroup.com on Black Friday of 2014 for 99 cents. And I took that as a sign that I was going to open a law firm, and so I did. I tell people all the time, I'm a business owner who happens to own a law firm, not the other way around. So given my history and my background, I always tend to give a healthy amount of business advice to go with your more traditional legal advice that you would expect. But that's the long and short of it.
I love your story. So I'm actually from Jupiter, Florida. So you're from Mars, I'm from Jupiter. This is perfect. I can't wait to dig deep into this conversation.
A real planetary
And Rich,
thing going.
Yeah, your background, putting your own business while you're going to law school and how you convince your previous business partner without having the background, that's amazing, right? And you're the perfect person to talk about this with our listeners. We're going to talk about a little bit of owning your business and the legal considerations, entrepreneurship stuff in there, and what an attorney provides from a value perspective in the earliest stages of putting a business together. So, with that said, so let's say we have a listener that's actually listening right now and they're thinking about putting their own business together soon, right? They could be on their own, or maybe they're thinking, do I need a partner? Or how does that work? Like, what what would you say to someone like that, given your experience? How do you go through all those questions in your head?
Yeah, so traditionally when someone comes into my office with a lot of those questions, or sometimes they're doing it before they've quit their job, sometimes they're doing it after, um, the the first thing I always say to people is start with the end in mind, right? So what's your primary objective? Are you leaving your job because you just don't like it or want to control your own destiny? The business you're starting, is it a business? Is it a job? Is it something that's sellable? Do you want to take it public? Do you want investors? Because all of those questions, though seemingly complicated, inform me and really any other attorney who would work with somebody what comes next, right? Because fundamentally, when you are talking the legalities of going into business on your own, the first thing that you're almost always asking is, what entity do I pick? And that could be an LLC or a corporation, generally speaking. And the answers to those previous questions do impact which of those two entities may work best for you. So, for example, if you said, Rich, I've got this tech company idea, I'm going to build an application and I'm going to eventually take it public, and we're going to be like the next, not Facebook or social media, but some other useful app. Then I would tell you, hey, you're going to be a corporation taxed as a C Corp, and here's all the reasons why. Versus if you told me, hey, I'm going to open a food truck and we're just going to run around Northeast Florida selling tacos, then an LLC would probably be just fine. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to the only reasons you're opening a business entity are predominantly two. At first being liability protection, right? If you're going into business on your own, you don't want to have unlimited liability for anything and everything that happens. And then the second thing is taxation. So you're trying to take advantage of as much of the tax code as you can to reclassify income out of quote unquote self-employed income and into some other version of income, whether that be K1 or something else. It's more for the CPAs to deal with. But in my world, we tend to address the first portion, which is the liability portion. And generally speaking, the big things there are treat your business like a business. So don't buy your groceries from your law firm account, in my case.
Right.
That's a bad idea. That falls into an alter ego thing. But that's fundamentally at the very beginning, those are the initial considerations that if you're asking your CPA or your lawyer about these things, just be prepared with that information, because it's really going to help them give you the best advice possible.
And that makes perfect sense. It totally makes perfect sense. So now I have clients, right? And a lot of them have quit their jobs and they want to put together, and the funny thing is you gave fintech or insurtech, whatever, as an example. So let's just kind of go that route, because I do know that I have listeners that are now in that space where you're thinking, oh, this sounds like, for lack of a better term, gold mine right now. There's a lot of investors who want to invest in fintech or insurtech for that matter. So if someone is in that space right now thinking, well, when do I do what? Like, when do I consult an attorney? When do I bring in a CPA? Or when do I start looking at the investors? And what do you do?
So it's a big question, and I'll do my best to break it down. So the answer preliminarily is getting your professionals involved from the earliest stages possible is going to be incredibly valuable to you for any number of reasons. And the first and most important reason is because so much of the future of your company hinges on how you start. Those very first few decisions that you make can have an incredibly beneficial or somewhat detrimental impact on your ability to achieve your goals. So identifying one of the things that you talked about, venture capital and investors, there are no shortage of people looking for alternative places to put money in the economy we're currently in, and that seems to be continuing without trying to address anything too big there. But you have to remember, one of the things I give people all the time is watch a couple episodes of Shark Tank if you've never done that. That's going to really give you a good idea of what investors are looking for when they're evaluating your company. So if you're walking in with a pitch deck on a fintech app that you haven't even developed yet, don't expect to get a very good deal or even be able to maintain a controlling interest in your company, because the person with the money is going to want to basically seize as much control as they can, knowing that there's nothing there yet. On the flip side, if you're able to bootstrap or use family and friends to kind of fund the development of your app, get it revenue positive, it doesn't have to be profitable yet, but at least get some people paying for it or generating some revenue of some kind. Now you've got a lot more bargaining power. And you can do a lot of different things with that bargaining power. So you can create multiple shares of stock, you can or classes of stock, as it were. So preferred or different types of common stock. And the reasons you do that are to maintain control over your company. The moment that you lose control, you could fall into the same position that I once fell into. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, any number of really famous entrepreneurs have all kind of at one time or another lost control of the company they started and have somewhat unceremoniously been removed from that company. I don't put myself in the same category as those other guys, but it does happen more frequently than you think, and you can prevent it to some extent if you get good advice early and understand what you're up against early. The unfortunate thing is sometimes people just wait too long, and once they're kind of too far down the road, there's a lot more difficulty to recover from those early decisions as opposed to just setting it up correctly. And I would tell you, just as a practical matter from my perspective, it may seem like a lot of money at the time when you're starting, but the reality is it's a lot cheaper than trying to clean up a bad situation almost unequivocally every single time. So
Right. Just like they say, prevention is better than cure, right?
all the time.
all the things you just mentioned, if I were just starting my company, so when I started my own company, I kind of went through the same process. But if I were thinking, okay, now I have this app and I know I'm going to get investors at some point, I wouldn't even think to involve an attorney in the beginning. Just, I
And
guess
most people don't,
maybe.
to be honest.
Yeah.
The world portrays private equity and everything else as just this like swimming pool of money that anybody can get.
Yeah.
But it's really not that easy. And when it is that easy, it almost always is problematic. There are, without getting into great detail, there are very specific rules on, the SEC promulgates a lot of rules related to who can invest and how they invest and all of those sorts of things. And more importantly, the more sophisticated investors that are familiar with private equity, are familiar with investing in startups, they will act a very specific way even in the earliest stages. And oftentimes those are the types of organizations and people that you want to involve yourself with because of their familiarity with the process. If you get involved with somebody who is just John Smith's rich uncle who is looking for a better return on the market, unfortunately, if that person doesn't have experience investing in private companies or startups of various types, you could have just set yourself up by tying yourself to a boat anchor, and you may live to regret that decision for the rest of your life. But that's why even an hour consultation with any attorney who kind of knows and understands this stuff, unfortunately, I would say that in some circumstances, I end up talking people out of their idea because they just didn't know what they didn't know. But other times, it just gives people the motivation to kind of take a step back, look at what they were thinking they were going to do, and then recalibrate and move forward. And that's what ultimately I'm hoping for, right? I'm not hoping to crush anyone's dreams, but I want people to come into their new thing with eyes wide open and an understanding of the reality that, look, entrepreneurship takes a certain amount of crazy. It's not for everybody.
Right.
I determined early on that I possessed that certain type of crazy, but you might not, and you might get halfway through and realize you don't. So embracing those realities on the front end is definitely the biggest key for success, short-term, long-term, any term really. Just get that advice early, and that applies to everything. I mean, not just legal stuff. I mean, I know in your world, life insurance, disability insurance, all that is cheaper when you're younger. Get more advice early. If I could tell the younger version of myself, I would have done that. But all the early advice you can get.
Which, in reality, like you said, and this from a life insurance perspective or insurance, whatever, disability, long-term care, people come to me usually when they come to me and say, I really, really need to get this done. That tells me something happened. You know, they just had COVID, or they came from the doctor, they were diagnosed with something, and now they're really in a hurry to put this thing into force. So now, in my world, sometimes it's fixable. They're going to pay a higher amount for the waiting time they did, or I turn them away and say, there's nothing I can do for you at this moment, maybe in 10 years or whatever. So let's say, for example, an entrepreneur started getting so excited about this new business, and now they're like, oh, I'm just going to do a online, because, you know, you can form your LLC online. You know, there's all kinds of stuff nowadays. They started doing that. And then now they're in the process of thinking, oh no, I'm going to get some investors now. Okay, now what? Now they come to someone like you. Is it fixable? I mean, obviously it's not what we want, but in reality, there are some who get really, really gung-ho about an idea and just go. Now, what do you do in that situation?
The short answer is yes, it's fixable. It's all in how far you go. So in your example, right, in the insurance world, it's like, hey, I just got diagnosed with some sort of degenerative disease and now I want to get life insurance. Obviously, that's far too far. You've crossed the last available bridge, and tough luck on getting life insurance. In my world, there are similar milestones or markers along the way. Forming your company on your own online, most people are not going to completely kill themselves or their business by doing that. There's nothing wrong with it. And oftentimes that part of it is such a small part of the larger organization that isn't public record that you're not going to harm yourself there. Opening your Shopify store, doing business for a year where you're the only owner of the company, all of those things you're not really going to do generally unbelievably detrimental harm to yourself or your business. When it starts to reach that point of no return is, hey, I took 5 different people's money as part of investments in my company, and here are all of the agreements that their lawyers handed me that I just signed because I needed the money.
Oh, yeah.
Now we've got a real problem, because you've already taken people's money, you've already signed off on agreements, you've already done all of those things. It's going to be really hard for me to help you, or harder for me to help you devise a way out of that than it would have been much earlier in the process. So in other words, all hope is not lost. If you've already started and you didn't get any advice, it's a lot like anything else in life. You just have to be self-aware enough to know that your business is growing and adjusting in a way that requires a little bit more attention to detail. So I'll give a perfect example. If widgets are really easy because they're tangible, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people come up with a widget, a piece of clothing, headphone case, whatever it is. They come up with a widget that everybody wants. And the first thing is, hey, I've determined that everybody likes my widget. But they don't really consider, well, how would I scale this widget? If I put an ad in SkyMall and all of a sudden I got an order for 100,000 of these, am I going to be able to make it? So oftentimes people kind of accidentally put themselves in these impossible positions where they're pursuing that monumental growth that they were always looking for, but they really weren't prepared for it legally, financially, systems-wise, structurally, infrastructure. They just get a little bit too far out over their skis, and they're not really prepared for that big growth that they're looking for. Versus, again, as you've already indicated, a little bit of prevention or a little bit of preventative care on the front end can really allow you to seize that opportunity and then some, by just putting yourself on better footing to jump off into that 10x, 100x growth, no matter what your business is. So hopefully that got to the heart of your question, but the
Yes.
short answer is it depends. I hate to use that, but don't think that something is completely beyond repair just because you find yourself in a bit of a pickle. It just might cost you more. That's all.
Yes, I understand, right? There's a key term right there. It just might cost you a little bit more because now it's fixing rather than setting it up, right? Mm-hmm. So as an attorney, let's say you have now an entrepreneur who's done well and maybe trying to get more funding because now they want to expand. Mm-hmm. Is this something that an attorney usually gets involved in, and what to a point? Most business owners wouldn't necessarily think about it. They would just think, okay, it's another business transaction. Like you said, I'll get some legal docs about the exchange of money. Here's a note or whatever, right? Yep. So, what are your thoughts when someone is in that stage?
So the phrase I often use with folks is think big, act small. And that might sound counterintuitive, but most times what I'm dealing with is small businesses, right? So they view themselves as too small to, say, have full-time general counsel. I promise you, everybody on the Fortune 500 has full-time general counsel. Which is, for the uninitiated, an attorney that is literally in the office every day to do nothing but work for that company. In many cases, an entire staff of attorneys. And that the whole point of that is to put them at a competitive advantage. And so what I tell my clients is, look, you you're a small business, you need to act like a small business, but you need to keep your eyes on the prize. You need to think big. It doesn't mean that I need to be on staff and in your office every single day, but it's worth even just a sanity call to me or send me a quick document. I'm not going to charge you if it only takes me 5 minutes to look it over. Involve me as frequently as possible in order to allow me to help you best. And so that's a personal philosophy of mine. I can't speak for everybody else in the legal industry, but it's one of those things where the other thing I tell people is your core team goes beyond me. So you really need to have you can call it the four-legged stool, you can use whatever analogy you want, but you've got your attorney to kind of keep an eye out, mostly for liability, to review contracts, to kind of keep you out of hot water with regulators and that sort of thing. You've got your CPA, who really should be, in many ways, your tax expert. Not only just filing your taxes, but helping you plan for things, helping you understand why you're being taxed, help you understand ways that you can be doing things that are more tax advantageous. Then you've got your financial planner, which generally is looking out for you as your the business owner's personal wealth, and kind of guiding you and directing you on various elements of that, whether it be estate tax or investment strategies or different things along those lines. And then you've got your insurance reps. Generally, that's going to be sometimes they're the same person. So P&C, life, disability, long-term care, or sometimes it's two different people. But you're gonna want both, because inevitably you're going to need property and casualty insurance for your business, and you're gonna need life insurance, disability, maybe not as a benefit to your employees, maybe you do, but on a personal level, you're gonna need it, because it's 100%. When you own your own business, oftentimes you are the sole, you're beyond the sole breadwinner for your family. You're the only reason that your business works. So
right, especially
it's
in startups.
incredibly important. Yeah, it's incredibly important, especially at the early stages of your business, when you don't have backup, when you don't have infrastructure, when you don't have an entire C-suite full of people that are looking out for you, to make sure you're insured against, or your family is insured against those risks. So to your point, you may not think you need those people, but if you find the right group of people to fill all of those seats, they can definitely help you maximize your opportunities for success, both personally and professionally, in your business as you grow and or don't. Even if you fail, there's failure planning that you can do to minimize how bad that failure hurts. Failure is not always a bad thing. It can lead to a lot of good things in the future. I can look back at my own life and say that unequivocally, but you can definitely plan against certain risks associated with failure. So that would be the best advice I could give, is don't rely on any one person. Get a multiplicity of voices in the room. And to the extent you've got any one person grabbing for too much control, that should usually be a sign that maybe they're not the right
Red
person
flag.
for you.
Yes, yes. Well, Rich, this is so helpful. I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with us. Of course, we could talk about this all day long. Is
Of
there
course.
something else that you want to share with our listeners with regard to this topic?
The one thing that I would always, the one thing that I would really want to highlight for anyone considering starting their own business of any kind, whether that be a local dry cleaner or a fintech company, or any sort of tech company, always consider whether you need a partner right away or whether you can wait to take on that partner, and truthfully evaluate what partnership looks like. so at the very beginning of this conversation, we kind of talked a lot about like the fact that you can do a lot of damage at the earliest stages of your business if you're not careful. And you look no further than something I'm very passionate about, which is the music industry. So some of my favorite bands, and I know this might evoke some strong opinions, but Creed.
Tell me you like Nirvana.
Well, yeah, Nirvana. But Creed, the Beatles, the Goo Goo Dolls, a lot of,
Sure.
and there are literally countless examples. But most people don't realize that these bands are inherently businesses. And oftentimes the reason they break up is because of money. In other words, it has to do with royalty splits and who wrote more, who contributes more to the band's public image, or who, as a fan of these bands and artists, we look at it and we're like, this is so trivial. You play music for a living. Like, get over yourselves and make more music. But at the end of the day, it's in their world, it's a business dispute. It's a fundamental disagreement about how they conduct the business of being a band. And that analogy works literally in every business because, for example, and this is something I hear a lot, I have this great idea. All I need is money. And the idea person says, like, this idea will make tens of millions of dollars, and we're going to be the next Google. We're going to be the next whatever. And then the money people come in and say, well, your idea is worth nothing unless I write you a check to help you get to step one of your idea. And then the idea people say, well, yeah, but I'm not going to give you 50% of my business for that check because I'm the idea person. And you can see the circular logic, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's this real war that goes on in the business world. It's like, well, I'm the idea guy, so inherently I'm more valuable than the money guy, or I'm the engineer guy, so inherently I'm more valuable than the leadership guy, or whatever. It all comes down to what role do you play, and how do you make sure that everybody playing those roles can work well together. And there's dozens of leadership books about all these concepts, but realistically, it can come down to the way you form your company. So let's say you've got three best friends and you coming out of college, and you're like, we're going to form this tech company and we're going to split it evenly. Each of us is going to have 25%. And then you want to raise money. Well, if all of you were contributing equally and all of you were contributing similar sets of skills but in different ways and advancing the ball forward, let's just say you had to sell at least 20% of your company to bring in enough venture capital to get rolling. Well, guess what? Even if two of you completely agree on a direction of a company, more than likely you don't have enough shares to influence the direction of the company because you're all minority holders at that point. So the company really lacks a central shareholder or a group of central shareholders, a small enough group of central shareholders to push the company forward when those really difficult early stage decisions need to be made. And so anybody that's been in a partnership will tell you, generally speaking, don't ever take on a partner unless you absolutely positively need them. And that advice holds true. I'm here to tell you, having represented people on all sides of it, having talked to people at every available stage, never take on a partner unless you absolutely have to, and that partner brings something to the table that really propels you forward. And that's the single biggest mistake that people can make is they go into business with family. That's one I see all the time, despite having to talk people out of it. Keep family and business separate to the maximum extent possible. It's just business is business and family is family, and you really don't want to mix them unless you've got a particularly good functional family. There are certain generational family businesses that do really well. But I will tell you that's the exception, not the rule. Taking money from
Right.
your cousin to invest in your company on the promise that you're going to make them, that you're going to refund the money they took out of retirement and then some, is a really bad idea. So that's the biggest thing. Really closely
So,
evaluate who your partners are, when you need them, why you need them, and take it from there.
so I have one question on that. What about spouses? You see, yeah,
Spouses?
now we're getting into very tricky stuff here.
Yeah, exactly. Now you're asking me to be a marriage counselor. So it's the.
Partners, right?
So here's what I'll tell you. As a married individual, and my wife is an entrepreneur as well. If you're talking spouses, and this is a fascinating question that I've never been asked before, but interestingly enough, it really kind of hit a portion of my brain that is right on the money. But speaking from my own experience, being married to somebody and being in business with that person creates a complicating factor, especially when the number one reason for most marital disputes is money. Well, when all of
Right.
your money is tied up in this business that the two of you work in together, that only begs to create further dispute about money. How do we move this thing forward? What is your role in moving it forward? Now we want to have kids. What happens now? The thing I would tell you, or anybody that's married or wants to be married or is on the way to being married, if you want to be in business with your spouse, partner, whatever, the amount of communication that needs to be ongoing almost all the time about your personal life, your needs in your personal life, your needs in your business life, the amount of extra communication that you need to just A, keep your marriage healthy, and B, keep your business healthy
Sanity.
is exponentially higher than that of a couple where even only one spouse is part of the business. And to be honest, there are lots of situations like mine, for example, where I'm not directly a part of my wife's business and my wife's not directly a part of mine, but we're both indirectly supporting each other in
Sure.
that day-to-day operation. We determined very early on that we would never work together in the same business, but it worked perfect for us to have separate businesses. So you really just have to be honest with yourself and with your spouse at the earliest stages of the game in order to be able to achieve the amount of success that you want. Because again, from experience, divorce has a way of crushing even the best businesses.
Sure.
Because it doesn't become about the business anymore. It becomes about, how do I harm the other person? So,
Which is really
yeah,
unfortunate, but that is the
super
reality.
unfortunate.
That is the reality. Oh, Rich, like I said, we can talk about this all day long, but all great things have to come to an end, like you said.
They do.
So if there's anyone listening to us right now or watching us, and they want to get in touch with you and they have any questions, they're interested in learning more about some of the stuff that we talked about here, how do they do that? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so one short caveat that I should have made on the front end but didn't. I'm only licensed in the state of Florida. So everything today is intended to be educational. I'm not trying to provide specific legal advice to anybody. But if you do, if you operate your business and you happen to be in Florida, you are welcome to give me a call. My phone number is 904-990-7777. Super easy to remember. Or you can
Yeah.
just Google St. Augustine Law Group, so St. Augustine Law Group, and I should pop up relatively easily on that search, or just St. Augustine, staugustinelawgroup.com. Any of those places, there will be a phone number, an email address to get a hold of me, and I do my best to get back to folks as quickly as possible. I do represent folks all over the state of Florida. So if you don't happen to be in Northeast Florida, but you're comfortable working remotely and virtually, as many people are these days, I do have quite a few clients who operate all over Florida, and then their businesses operate all over the world in some cases. So happy to assist anybody regardless of where they find themselves. And if I can't, I'll be the first to tell you that I can't, and I'll give you a referral to someone who can.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you, Rich. This has been very educational and I really appreciate it. I look
Thank
forward
you.
to the next time you and I chat.
Always.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Information shared during the show are opinions of the speakers. They are not legal, financial, or tax advice specific to you. Consult your own specialist, attorney, accountant, financial planner, or insurance advisor for your specific situation.